The galaxy's stars glittered in their eternal indifference as the Galactic Council convened once again in their sprawling station orbiting the neutral world of Kael'thar. The chamber was filled with representatives of countless species, their forms as varied as their homeworlds. Towering insectoids clicked their mandibles, reptilian emissaries hissed low greetings, and gelatinous beings shimmered in undulating patterns. At the far end of the chamber, humanity's lone delegate sat silent, his face impassive beneath the carefully maintained decorum required of his position. Ambassador Elias Kerr had spent years representing Earth in these halls, advocating for humanity's place in the greater galactic order. Today, he stared across the table at Councillor Vec'Ryath, the cold-eyed representative of the Draken Imperium, who spoke with a thinly veiled smirk. The Draken were an empire built on dominance, their fleets unmatched and their conquests unending. For decades, they had toyed with humanity, testing its limits while hiding behind the Council's bureaucracy. Ambassador Kerr, Vec'Ryath began, his voice a calculated drawl. Once again, we must address the issue of your people encroaching on Imperium trade routes. Our patience with these transgressions wears thin. Elias clenched his jaw. The encroachments were fabrications, excuses crafted to justify ever more invasive actions. Human freighters had been seized, colonies disrupted, and outposts sabotaged, all under the guise of maintaining order. The Council had done nothing but issue lukewarm warnings, ensuring that humanity remained under scrutiny while the Draken's crimes went unpunished. My people seek only peaceful coexistence, Elias replied evenly, his hands folded before him. We honor the treaty set forth by this Council, but we will not tolerate baseless accusations. Vec'Ryath's smirk widened. Peaceful coexistence? Fascinating words for a species born from a death world. You misunderstand your place in this galaxy, Ambassador. Restraint is all that has kept us from removing your kind altogether. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. The tension was palpable, yet no one intervened. Humanity had always been seen as an anomaly, too young, too unpredictable. Despite their technological advancements, the other species regarded humans as dangerous, a powder keg waiting to explode. Elias took a slow breath. Restraint, Counselor? Is that what you call unprovoked attacks on our freighters? The sabotage of our colonies? I assure you, humanity's patience has limits. Before Vec'Ryath could retort, the chamber's central holographic display lit up, projecting an incoming message. A voice, calm and authoritative, filled the space. Ambassadors, I apologize for the interruption, but urgent matters require the Council's attention. The hologram displayed Captain Adrian Hart, commander of the human fleet stationed at the outer colony of Tempest 6. Her uniform was pristine, but her expression carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. The galaxy respected the fleet's efficiency but feared their unpredictability. Tempest 6 has been attacked, Hart reported. 3 settlements obliterated, thousands dead. Draken vessels were spotted retreating as our forces arrived. Gasps echoed around the chamber. Elias rose slowly, his heart pounding. Captain Hart, he said, his voice steady but taut. Can you confirm the attacker's identity? Hart's expression darkened. Visual records and debris analysis point to the Draken Imperium. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, some demanding investigations, others calling for calm. Vec'Ryath remained silent, his eyes locked on Elias, a glint of triumph in his gaze. He didn't need to deny the accusations. The Council's bureaucracy would bog the process down for years, ensuring no consequences would follow. Elias felt the weight of the galaxy's gaze upon him. For decades, humanity had played the part of the patient diplomat, enduring insults and injuries for the sake of peace. But something deep inside him shifted. There was no longer room for measured words or carefully crafted resolutions. I will not stand by while my people are slaughtered, Elias declared, his voice cutting through the cacophony. If the Council cannot hold the Draken accountable, humanity will. The room fell silent. Vec'Ryath's smirk returned. Careful, Ambassador. Such defiance could be your undoing. Elias stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. No, Counselor. It will be yours. As the chamber erupted once more, Elias turned and strode toward the exit. His mind raced with the implications of what he had just said, but his resolve was unshakable. Humanity's patience had reached its breaking point. The galaxy would soon learn what that meant. The silence aboard the human flagship Resolute Dawn was a stark contrast to the chaos Elias Kerr had left behind in the Galactic Council chamber. The massive vessel, a testament to humanity's engineering ingenuity, hung in orbit over Earth, its sleek hull gleaming against the backdrop of stars. Inside the command center, the atmosphere was tense, every officer awaiting the ambassador's arrival. When Elias entered, his usually calm demeanor had transformed into something colder, sharper. His eyes swept across the room, meeting those of Captain Adrian Hart, who stood at attention near the central console. "Captain," he began, his voice steady but firm. "Report." Hart nodded. "Recon teams have confirmed the destruction of 3 settlements. The death toll is in the tens of thousands. Survivors are being evacuated to nearby colonies, but the damage to infrastructure is catastrophic. The Draken fleet was gone by the time our forces arrived." Elias exhaled slowly. "Any response from the Council?" Hart's lips pressed into a thin line. "The usual bureaucracy. They've issued a formal condemnation but refused to acknowledge the Draken as aggressors without further investigation." Elias shook his head, his frustration evident. "Of course. And Vekryeth sits comfortably in his throne while the Council debates semantics." He turned to the holographic map hovering above the central console. It displayed the Draken Imperium's territory, a vast swath of the galaxy dotted with resource-rich planets and fortified star systems. The map also highlighted the routes their fleets frequently used to patrol their borders. Elias's gaze fixed on one particular sector, where the attack on Tempest 6 had originated. "Captain Hart," Elias said, his tone decisive, "assemble the fleet. We're moving to Sector Delta 17. If the Council won't act, we will." A murmur rippled through the command center. Hart hesitated, her expression one of both admiration and concern. "Sir, are you suggesting a direct confrontation? That would be seen as an act of war." Elias met her gaze. "It already is, Captain. The Draken declared it when they slaughtered our people. If we wait for the Council to deliberate, they'll strike again. Humanity didn't come this far to be trampled by cowards." Hart straightened. "Understood, sir. I'll ready the fleet." As the crew moved with renewed purpose, Elias felt the weight of his decision settle over him. Humanity's fleets were advanced, their technology innovative, but they were outnumbered. The Draken Imperium's forces dwarfed their own. Yet Elias knew that this wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for dignity, for the right to exist without fear of annihilation. Hours later, the fleet mobilized. Over 24 ships emerged from Earth's orbit, their engines igniting in synchronized bursts of light. Fighters, destroyers, and massive carriers formed a formidable armada, each vessel a symbol of humanity's resilience. At the fleet's heart was the Resolute Dawn, its presence commanding and unyielding. As the ships entered warp, Hart joined Elias on the bridge. "The fleet's ready, but we need more than firepower to win this. The Draken won't fight us in open combat, they'll try to wear us down, bait us into traps." Elias nodded. "I know. That's why we're going to take the fight to them in a way they won't expect." He gestured to a tactical officer, who brought up schematics of Draken's supply routes. "The Draken rely on these trade lines to sustain their war efforts. Disrupt them, and their forces weaken. But this isn't just about cutting off resources, it's about sending a message." Hart's brow furrowed. "A message?" Elias's gaze hardened. "That humanity won't be underestimated anymore." The plan was risky, but it was bold. The fleet would strike at critical supply depots deep within Draken territory, forcing their hand. The goal wasn't just to cripple their logistics but to provoke them into revealing their true strength. Humanity had been playing defense for too long. It was time to take the initiative. As the fleet dropped out of warp near the first target, the bridge buzzed with activity. A massive Draken station loomed ahead, its spiked architecture illuminated by the glow of nearby stars. Dozens of smaller ships patrolled the area, their formations tight and disciplined. "Enemy vessels detected," an officer reported. "They're moving to intercept." Elias stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "Deploy the fighters. Keep their attention on us while our strike teams take out the station's core." The Resolute Dawn led the charge, its cannons unleashing a barrage of plasma that lit up the void. Draken ships retaliated, their weapons painting streaks of energy across the darkness. The smaller human vessels darted between enemy fire, their agility unmatched. Hart coordinated the strike teams with precision, guiding them through the chaos. Boarding pods launched from the carriers, their trajectories aimed at the station's vulnerable points. As the pods made contact, human soldiers poured into the station, their suits designed for both combat and environmental adaptation. The Draken defenders were fierce, their armored forms towering over the humans, but the strike teams were relentless. Using unconventional tactics, they exploited the station's design flaws, planting charges along critical systems. Back on the bridge, Elias monitored the operation closely. Every move counted, every decision a matter of life and death. The tension was suffocating, but he refused to falter. "Captain," an officer called out. "The charges are set." Hart relayed the command. "Strike teams, fall back. All ships, prepare for detonation." The station erupted in a cascade of fire and debris, the explosion illuminating the battlefield. The Draken ships hesitated, their formation breaking as they processed the loss. "Retreat!" Elias commanded. "Before reinforcements arrive." The fleet pulled back, disappearing into warp just as enemy reinforcements emerged from the shadows. The first strike was complete, but the battle was far from over. Elias knew the Draken would respond with fury, and humanity would have to weather the storm. But for the first time, they had struck fear into their oppressors, and the galaxy was beginning to tremble. The warp engines hummed faintly as the human fleet regrouped at a hidden outpost on the outskirts of the Xanther Nebula. The station, a relic of humanity's early days in interstellar travel, had been fortified over the years but was far from impregnable. It was here that Elias Kerr and his officers gathered to assess their next move. The recent strike had been a success, yet the victory felt hollow. The destruction of the Draken supply station had provoked a response far swifter than anticipated. Within hours, intelligence reports indicated a massive Draken armada mobilizing, their warships amassing near the frontier. The Imperium was preparing to crush humanity once and for all. Captain Adrian Hart stood beside Elias, her face lit by the soft glow of the tactical display. "They're bringing everything," she said, her voice tight. "Warships, carriers, even their dreadnoughts. If they find us, we won't stand a chance." Elias didn't flinch. His eyes scanned the display, where red markers signified the incoming Draken fleet. "Then we can't let them find us," he replied. "They think they're invincible. It's time to show them they're wrong." The officers exchanged uncertain glances. The odds were grim, and morale was fragile. But Elias had a plan, a desperate, audacious strategy born out of necessity. "Captain Hart," Elias said, turning to her. "How long until the Draken fleet reaches our location?" 17 hours at best," she replied. "Maybe less if they push their engines." "Good," Elias said. "We'll make sure they regret every second of that journey." The plan was ambitious. Using the nebula's volatile environment to their advantage, the fleet would set a series of traps, exploiting the Draken's reliance on brute force and predictable tactics. Humanity couldn't match their firepower, but they could outthink them, turning the nebula into a battlefield where every decision mattered. Preparations began immediately. Squadrons of fighters deployed to lay mines along the Draken's anticipated route. Engineers worked tirelessly to modify their weapons for precision strikes, while scouts navigated the nebula's treacherous terrain, identifying choke points and ambush zones. Hart approached Elias as the preparations unfolded. "This plan is bold, I'll give you that," she said. "But if anything goes wrong, we're finished." Elias met her gaze. "If we do nothing, we're finished. The Draken think they've already won. It's time to remind them who we are." As the hours passed, the tension aboard the Resolute Dawn grew palpable. Soldiers and officers moved with purpose, their faces etched with determination. They knew the stakes. This wasn't just a battle, it was a fight for survival, for humanity's place in a galaxy that sought to crush them. When the Draken fleet finally arrived, the nebula came alive with chaos. Massive warships carved through the swirling clouds of gas, their weapons lighting up the void. The vanguard led the charge, their precision unmatched, but the humans struck first. The mines detonated in rapid succession, ripping through the Draken's vanguard and forcing their fleet to scatter. As the enemy ships adjusted their formations, human fighters emerged from the haze, weaving through enemy fire to deliver pinpoint strikes. Elias watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the Resolute Dawn. "Keep them off balance," he ordered. "Don't let them regroup." Hart coordinated the fleet with precision, her commands a lifeline amidst the chaos. "Squadron Delta, hit their rear flank. Gamma Wing, target their carriers. Don't give them room to breathe." Despite their best efforts, the Draken's sheer numbers began to take their toll. A human destroyer exploded in a fiery cascade, its wreckage scattering across the battlefield. A carrier suffered a direct hit, its engine sputtering before it was engulfed in flames. The situation grew dire. Elias clenched his fists, his mind racing for a solution. "Hart," he said, his voice firm. "Prepare the Resolute Dawn for a direct assault." Hart's eyes widened. "You're not serious." "I am," Elias replied. "The dreadnought is their linchpin. If we take it out, the rest of their fleet will fall apart." Hart hesitated but nodded. "Understood. I'll rally the fighters for cover." The Resolute Dawn surged forward, its cannons blazing as it cut through the battlefield. Enemy fire rained down upon it, but the ship held steady, its shields absorbing the brunt of the assault. Fighters swarmed around it, engaging Draken ships to clear a path. The Draken dreadnought loomed ahead, a behemoth of metal and power. Its cannons unleashed devastating blasts, tearing through anything in their path. But Elias was undeterred. "Target their power core," he commanded. "Divert all remaining energy to weapons and shields. We finish this now." The Resolute Dawn closed the distance, its cannons focusing on the dreadnought's vulnerable points. The enemy ship retaliated, but the human vessel pressed on, refusing to yield. As the Resolute Dawn delivered its final salvo, the dreadnought's core destabilized. A massive explosion tore through the ship, its fragments scattering like fiery comets. The shockwave rippled across the battlefield, forcing both fleets to disengage. The Draken fleet, now leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. Humanity's forces, battered but unbroken, rallied around the Resolute Dawn. The battle was over, but the cost had been immense. Elias stood on the bridge, his expression resolute. "Let them run," he said. "They'll remember this day for the rest of their lives. The galaxy will." Hart approached, her voice quiet. "We survived, but barely." "What now?" Elias looked out at the nebula, its swirling clouds a reminder of the chaos they had endured. "We rebuild," he said. "And we prepare for whatever comes next." The bridge fell silent, the weight of their victory settling over them. Humanity had faced the Imperium's fury and held their ground. For the first time, the galaxy trembled, not at the might of the Draken, but at the resilience of a species that refused to bow. The silence that followed the Draken retreat was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of damaged systems aboard the Resolute Dawn. The bridge crew moved with weary efficiency, their faces lined with exhaustion and relief. Every officer knew the truth: they had survived, but just barely. Elias Kerr stood at the central console, his gaze fixed on the holographic map of the battlefield. The wreckage of ships, both human and Draken, drifted in the nebula like scattered memories of the battle's brutality. The cost of their stand was steep, but they had achieved what many thought impossible. Humanity had forced the Imperium to retreat, proving they were more than a minor annoyance in the galactic order. Captain Adrian Hart approached, her uniform torn and streaked with soot, yet her posture remained firm. "Damage reports are coming in," she said. We've lost 6 ships, 2 more are barely holding together, and casualties are significant. Elias nodded, his expression grim. And the fleet? Rattled but intact, Hart replied. The crew's shaken, but they know what we accomplished today. Elias turned toward her, his voice steady. What we accomplished was survival. But survival isn't victory. Hart frowned. The Draken fled. That's a victory in my book. It's a message, Elias corrected. One the galaxy won't forget. But the Imperium will return, and next time, they'll come with something worse. We need to be ready. Hart fell silent, her gaze drifting to the window where the nebula's swirling colors cast an eerie light over the bridge. She knew he was right. The Draken had been caught off guard, but their empire was vast and resilient. This was only the beginning. A faint beeping interrupted their thoughts. The comms officer called out. Incoming transmission. It's from the Galactic Council. Elias's jaw tightened. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the familiar chamber of the Galactic Council. Delegates from countless species filled the screen, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outright anger. At the forefront was Counselor Vecryath, his reptilian features twisted into a sneer. Ambassador Kerr, Vecryath began, his tone dripping with disdain. Your actions have jeopardized the fragile peace of the galaxy. The Council demands an explanation for your unprovoked aggression. Elias stepped forward, his voice cold and unwavering. Unprovoked aggression? Spare me your hypocrisy, Counselor. The Draken attacked our colonies, slaughtered our civilians, and expected us to bow in submission. If the Council won't hold them accountable, humanity will. Vecryath's eyes narrowed. Your defiance has consequences, Ambassador. The Imperium will not forget this insult, and neither will the Council. Elias's lips curled into a grim smile. Good. Let them remember. Let them all remember what happens when humanity is pushed too far. He cut the transmission before Vecryath could respond, the holographic display fading to black. The bridge fell silent again, the weight of Elias's words hanging in the air. Hart broke the silence. That's going to make things complicated. Elias nodded. It already was. But now they know, humanity isn't to be underestimated. Over the next several hours, the fleet worked tirelessly to salvage what they could. Ships were repaired as much as possible, and the wounded were tended to in makeshift med bays. Messages of solidarity poured in from human colonies and allied factions, their words carrying a mixture of relief and hope. For the first time, humanity wasn't just surviving, they were inspiring. As the fleet prepared to leave the nebula, Elias called a final meeting with his senior officers. They gathered in the Resolute Dawn's war room, the air heavy with the gravity of their situation. Our stand here has bought us time, Elias began, his voice calm but resolute. But it's not enough. The Draken will regroup, and when they return, they'll bring the full force of their empire. We need to be ready, not just to defend, but to take the fight to them. Hart leaned forward, her expression serious. What are you proposing, sir? Unity, Elias said simply. The Council has failed to protect the galaxy from the Imperium's tyranny. If humanity stands alone, we'll be overwhelmed. But if we can rally other species, those who've suffered under the Draken, we can build something stronger than the Council ever was. The room fell silent as his words sank in. It was a bold plan, one fraught with risk, but the officers could see the logic in it. Humanity couldn't win this war alone, but together with others who shared their defiance, they might stand a chance. Hart nodded slowly. If anyone can pull that off, it's you, sir. Elias allowed himself a faint smile. Then let's get to work. As the fleet departed the nebula, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Word of humanity's stand spread quickly, whispers of their defiance reaching even the furthest corners of known space. For those under the Imperium's heel, it was a beacon of hope. For the Draken, it was a challenge they couldn't ignore. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, Elias stared out at the stars, his resolve stronger than ever. The battle had been won, but the war was just beginning. Humanity had shown the galaxy what they were capable of, and they weren't done yet.